The Apostle Paul, on his second missionary journey, went to Ephesus. And there was a group of believers there. And when the silversmith found out that he was, that his teachings, that his preaching was going to destroy their livelihood, they raised a stink, and we know how eventually Paul was had to leave Ephesus. It seems like those Ephesians were particularly adept at causing a ruckus. Matter of fact, there was one guy in Ephesus and that had his wits about him. He was, the Bible calls him the town clerk. And he stepped in and says, "You guys are about to get in trouble. What you're doing now is going to grab the attention of Rome, and Rome is going to come up here and he's going to come over here and take care of you guys. So cut it out. We have magistrates, we have people in authority, we can handle this legally and above board and all that kind of stuff. So you guys cut out the rioting," and so it was kind of calmed for a little while. Paul finished his missionary journey, went back to Antioch, and stayed there for a little while, and then decided to go on another missionary journey. And one of the first places that he went was back to Ephesus. And this time, on this third missionary journey, he found a group of people, I think there was 12 people, 12 men, who had been baptized with John's baptism. And so he asked them if what was their status, and they said, "Well, we've been baptized according to John's baptism, and have you not heard about the Holy Spirit?" And they said no. And so he preached the gospel to them, and they were baptized in the Holy Spirit. Also in the city of Ephesus was the group he left behind. And so I just mentioned those people because what's going to happen next in Paul's journeys is an indication about how vehement the Ephesians were to putting an end to the gospel. No matter how hard they tried, and they tried, not only did they do it right there in Ephesus, but they also did it by coming back to Jerusalem and causing havoc there as well. We'll get to that in just a minute. So he eventually left, finished his third missionary journey. On the way, it wasn't in Ephesus, but in another place, just southeast of there, I think. The Ephesians elders met him again. And he told them, be strong. I'm giving you the charge over the believers there in Ephesus. And the Bible says that they knelt there on the beach and prayed together. No, it doesn't say that. I'm sorry. It says it differently. He says they knelt there and he prayed with them. Now, that word "with" there, I think, is significant. He didn't pray for them. He prayed with them. Now, I think that corporate prayer is something that is going to have to be a part of revival and renewal here in our country. We don't just pray for revival. We pray with each other for revival. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Now, I don't know what those Ephesians prayed for, those Ephesian Christians. But I have an idea, okay? And this is just my imagination again. Y'all know how weird it can be sometimes. In praying with those people, that means that he prayed and they prayed, individuals prayed as a part of that prayer meeting. Can you imagine, can you read one of them's mind? Okay? Here's what I'm imagining took place in the mind of at least one of those guys there. Lord, Paul is leaving us. He's already said that we'll never see his face again. I don't know if I can do this without him. Lord, another guy thinks, Lord, did you hear what Paul said? He's talking about me being in a position of leadership in our church. I'm not sure I can handle that. Can you hear him thinking those lines? As Paul prayed with those men there on the beach. Lord, I'm not even sure I want to do this. Is there some way that you can make Paul say, okay, this applies to everybody but me? But that they prayed. He prayed with them, not for them, even though I'm sure he prayed for them as well. He left that place and went to another one. And it was there that they also knelt on the beach and prayed together. And they told him, Paul, you probably shouldn't ought to make this trip to Jerusalem. That's not a wise decision. You don't know what you're going to meet when you get to Jerusalem. And he eventually got to Caesarea on the coast. And there he was with Philip the evangelist and his daughters who were prophetesses, and who knows, maybe even the centurion showed up when Paul arrived. And but somebody else showed up. And I think his name was Abacus, or not Abacus. Huh? Agabus, that's what it was. He's a prophet. And he told Paul, don't go to Jerusalem. It has been revealed to me that what you are going to see when you get to Jerusalem is not going to be a pleasant experience. So it would probably be not a good idea for you to show up. Thus says the Lord, the Holy Spirit, this is how the Jews of Jerusalem will bind the man who owns this belt and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. That was after binding him with his own apron. But what an amazing response, Paul says. What are you doing? Weeping and breaking my heart. For I am ready not only to be imprisoned, but even to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. Now, that sounds like a tremendous commitment on the part of the Apostle Paul. And he meant it, because we know all the things, Paul lists them in Corinthians, all the things that he had to go through because of his preaching and of his ministry. I'm ready not only to be imprisoned, but even to die in Jerusalem. And in those days, he got ready and went up to Jerusalem. And beginning in verse 17 of Acts chapter 21. When we had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. After greeting them, he related one by one the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they had heard it, they glorified God. And they said to him, you see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews here of those who have believed. They are all zealous for the law. And they had been told about you, that you teach all the Jews who are amongst the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs. What is then to be done? They will certainly hear that you've come, and they're not going to like it. Okay? They've heard that you have been teaching Jews in the dispersion that don't live in Jerusalem or Judea. They've heard that you teach that they don't have to follow the law of Moses anymore. Now, there's thousands of them here in this city that know about that. What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. And then they say, Paul, do this. Do therefore what we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with them, and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance of the law. But as for the Gentiles who have believed, we have sent a letter with our judgment that they should abstain from that which was sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from that which was strangled, and from sexual immorality. Now we know about that letter because that took place in the Jerusalem Council in Acts chapter 15. And Paul seemed to be in agreement with that, but in that Jerusalem Council, he was particularly vehement about making sure that we don't hold the Gentiles to the law the way that the Jews were held to the law. But he was okay with the idea of, okay, all right, I'll go with that. They don't have to be they don't have to be circumcised. They don't have to go through all the law. They don't have to offer all the sacrifices. But they do, they do need to avoid sacrificing to idols, and from blood, and from that which is strangled, and from sexual immorality. Okay, but Paul was there as a defender, as an advocate for the Gentile Christians. Okay? Again, he's got a strong commitment to the message that God had given him to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. Then Paul, in verse 26, then Paul took them in, and the next day he purified himself along with them, and went into the temple, giving notice when the days of purification would be fulfilled, and the offering presented for each of them. And then, excuse the expression, all hell breaks loose. He went to the temple, and that was in spite of all the warnings that he had not to go to Jerusalem. He went to Jerusalem, and it just so happened that he went to the temple under a Nazarite vow of having shaved his head and making a vow to God. Was found there in the temple by who? By whom, I guess I should say. Them cotton-picking Ephesians. Maybe not, but they say this group that caused the ruckus were from Asia. And you know what's in Asia? Ephesus. And just like they started a riot in Ephesus, they probably, again, this is probable, this is just, it's not, the scripture doesn't say it specifically, but it's probable that they were the Ephesian Jews who caused this riot. And the reason I say that is because they saw Stephanus with Paul outside of the temple. They saw the two of them walking the streets of Jerusalem and assumed, horrible word, and assumed that Paul had taken Stephanus into the temple with him. And Stephanus was a Gentile from where? Ephesus. Now, how did they know Ephesus? How did they know Stephanus? How did he know he was from Ephesus? I think it's because they were from Ephesus and they knew him there. My personal opinion, again, but it makes all the sense in the world that how assuming that Paul had taken a Gentile Ephesian into the temple to worship, they thought that Paul in that way had defiled the temple. Okay, now, having reviewed all of the information about that experience with Paul, I'm going to ask you a question. Did Paul compromise his principles? He didn't? Are you sure? This advocate for Gentile Christians in the Jerusalem Council suddenly says to him, "Oh, okay, I'll bow down to you guys. I'll do the vow, and I'll do all those things that you want me to do just to keep peace in the church, etc., 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 etc." Is that what he did?
What in Rome do as Romans do?
You know what? If you read the commentaries on this particular passage, they do that. That's what they say. that, and to the Gentile become Gentile, to a Jew I become a Jew. That's what all of them, all the commentaries say. That's exactly the same thing. But you know something? To me, first of all, did he compromise his principles? No, he didn't. What he did was to edify and love. What was an act of edification and love to that church in Jerusalem. He wouldn't have done anything in the world to disturb that fellowship and to disturb their witness. What James said about the church in Jerusalem is amazing. Did you hear it? Paul gave a sterling report about what was going on in the Gentile world. And then James says, well, you've been around here for a while now, a few days. You can see that there are thousands in the city of Jerusalem that have come to know Christ as their Savior. Who would want to hurt that? Who would want to destroy that? Who would want to disturb that? Who would want to impede the progress that the gospel was having in the city of Jerusalem by causing a ruckus and saying, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to in the temple the way I want to, and I don't care what those people are saying. No, he didn't. He didn't compromise his principles, because what he did was the highest principle that he could ever live by, and that is the principle of love. He did what James said in order not to disturb or hurt or split the church in Jerusalem. He did what was most edifying and loving. Okay? Am I explaining this well? I see a few blank looks out there. Okay. All right. Did he compromise his principles? Number 2. No, he did not. He participated in a Jewish rite, R-I-T-E, knowing the ultimate fulfillment of those rites was in Jesus. This is not the first time we see Paul taking a vow. But we see him taking a vow here, knowing that vow did not put him in better stead with God. He did it because he knew that taking that vow and worshiping in the temple and offering sacrifice, he probably didn't offer a sacrifice, but to watch the sacrifices being offered, he understood among the hundreds of people, probably thousands of people that were there, worshiping as Jews, he understood best what the sacrifice of Jesus meant. He understood about the temple. His teacher was Gamaliel, one of the scholars of his day. He knew about all that. He knew the Word of God. He knew how that Word was fulfilled in Christ Jesus. And so when he bowed to what James recommended about taking this vow and taking that vow with those 4 people, those 4 men that were part of his church, he knew that all of that was because of Jesus. So did he compromise his principle of only Jesus? No, he didn't. What he did was understand the fulfillment in Christ of everything that he was going to experience in the temple that day. Is it right to worship on Saturday or Sunday?
Yes.
Yeah, both. It's not either or, it's a both and, right? Is it right to worship on Sunday or on Saturday? Why?
Today's the Sabbath. Every day.
That's right. Yeah, because that's right. It's every day. There is no. That's right. That's right. And because we understand what worship is, not because there's a legal day in which we should worship, but we understand what worship is, and we can worship anytime. I won't go into that. I will too. I have a little closet in my house, and it literally is a closet. I just have a little desk in there, and I go in there every once in a while and read my Bible and work on my journal and all that kind of stuff. And I was in there the other day, and it just so happened that on my music list popped up a song called We Shall Return. And it's an old song by the Gaither group. And it's a great song, and I just broke down. And it wasn't on a Saturday or Sunday, either one. You get you get why he was able to go into the temple and worship that day? Because he knew about Jesus. He knew that everything that was done there that day was that Jesus was a fulfillment of everything that was done there on that day. So he didn't have any trouble going in there to worship. He wasn't compromising his principles. And finally, was he compromising his principles? Well, if he was, it cost him. He had to pay the fees for those other guys as well as himself to have their heads shaved in taking that vow. It wasn't. He wasn't compromising his principles. As a matter of fact, he was willing to pay the price in order for those. He was willing to pay the price in order for there not to be a split in the church, and he was willing to pay the price because he knew that everything that he was going to do that day was fulfilled in Jesus, and he did it because. Let me read it to you. I said it better when I wrote it down than I am now. In taking the advice of James and the elders, he did what was most edifying and loving. He participated in a Jewish rite, knowing the ultimate fulfillment of those rites was in Jesus. And he put his money where his mouth was. He paid the other men's expenses. I repeat that because I think I and other believers of today need to understand that keeping the peace and participation in worship should cost us something. I'm going to read that last sentence again. I repeat that because I think that I and other believers of today need to understand that keeping the peace and participation in worship should cost us something. And I'm not talking about money. That's the price that Paul paid. And we ought to be aware of our responsibility to tithe and make offerings and that kind of thing. But you know something? I have 3 children, and a lot of times in starting churches, my children were the only ones in their Sunday school class. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it was just my family that I preached to on Sunday morning. Did my kids, when they were the only ones that were there in their Sunday school classroom and they're part of their youth group or their children's ministry, did they ever say, "Dad, let's join another church because they have some activities there for young people"? No, they didn't. Now, don't get me wrong; they enjoyed being with young people too. But they didn't go to another church just because ours didn't have a youth program. They didn't decide to go to another church just because we didn't have a praise band. They didn't go to another church just because there was somebody there that didn't speak to them that morning. And they wanted them to. They wanted to be the center of the attention. They didn't go to another church. They went to that one because they knew that this is where God wanted to be. And I'll sacrifice the youth group, or I'll sacrifice the praise band, or I'll sacrifice some other things. I'll pay those prices to make sure that the gospel gets preached in this place at this time. Keeping the peace and participation in worship should cost us something. No, it's not easy. It's a whole lot easier to go to a church where you can be a part of a youth group or a praise band or a men's group or whatever groups that they have. It's a lot easier to go to those places because there's no pressure. But when you're the only person here that's a youth, the pressure's on you to make sure that there's more people here that are youths. Okay? Guys, I hope you're getting my drift here with this idea. Keeping the peace, participation in worship, all of that should cost us something. And more than just our money, but our time and our talents, even our Sunday morning time together. Pay that price. Did Paul compromise his principles? No. He paid the price for not only him but for those other men who were going through that Nazarite vow.